A police officer and a culprit. Matt said I would have a weird day ahead. I was a senior officer, and whatever he said almost always turned out to be true. It was a given thing that if Matt said you would have a bad day, you would most definitely have it. That was the sole reason why everyone stayed away from him. They called Matt weird behind his back. But honestly, nothing could be as weird as the case I was to deal with on this day. "Sir, I need you to be as consistent as possible," I told the man sitting in front of me. He was bald and looked to be in his late 40s, at the least. His clothes were grubby, and he said he was on his way from his farm when the weirdest thing happened. The boy sitting beside him was another story, however. This boy, the man began again in a huff, jumped in front of my van. "I did not do any such thing," the young man answered in a broad tone. "You did, you lying piece of shit. I could have killed him," he added, and turned to me. I was already having a bad day, and he managed to make it worse. "All right," I said calmly. "Can we go through this again?" The man began. He was on his way home from the farm, and the young man sitting across from him tried to cross the road at the red light. It was a violation, he pointed out. I agreed. Then he said that the young man looked at his coming vehicle and did not move. He just stood there, staring at his van. No matter how many times I honked, the man barked, he did not move. Instead, he turned to me completely and opened his arms. "I was embracing death," the young man said finally. "You can do that somewhere else," the man growled. "Okay," I said. "Sir, please come down. Let me talk to him." I turned to the young man. "Can you please tell me your name, sir?" "Ethan," the young man answered. "Your whole name," I clarified. "Ethan Hopkins," he answered. "All right, Ethan, can you tell me what happened?" He shrugged, but finally looked up. For a moment, I was struck by his beauty. There was something extraordinary about his face. He did not look younger than 23 or 24, but I could still see the baby fat on his cheeks. I noticed several old cuts and bruises on his face. The most recent ones were near the right eye and the bottom lip. Even if regular lip biting could explain the cut in his bottom lip, there was no explanation for the other one. I kept my observations at the forefront of my mind. This was clearly a case of abuse. I was crossing the road, and then I heard this van coming up. "You had enough time to move," I added. He shrugged again. I tried to move, but I couldn't. "What does that mean now?" I asked and started noting down everything, even though there wasn't much I could do here. I knew the older man was looking for something else. I would have to sit through this, whether I liked it or not. My brain told me I should move, but my heart wouldn't allow me to. "Your emotions were conflicted?" I asked. He looked down and rubbed his finger over his thigh. I thought it was finally coming to an end. I stopped writing and paid complete attention to him. "What did you think was ending, Ethan?" "The pain," he answered. When we saw the tears slip down his cheeks, we went silent. It was clearly a sensitive case. If my observations were correct, he probably had someone abusive in his life. As I was gathering my thoughts, the older guy slapped his hand on the table and turned to Ethan. Ethan jumped at the sudden sound. "That does not mean I will let you go. You have to pay me a fine," he turned to me. "Officer, I need to file a case for mental distress." I sighed. It was sure going to be a long day. It was evening and I was leaving the station when I found Ethan sitting on a nearby bench. He was cold and rubbing his hands over his arms. I placed my stuff in my car and walked to him. I would be damned if he did something today. "Hey, Ethan," I said when I reached him. "Hi, officer." "What are you doing here?" I looked at my watch. "It's 9. Shouldn't you be on your way home?" "You know I cannot pay that much, right?" "What?" I asked and sat down beside him. "I cannot pay the fine," Ethan repeated. "I would have to work my ass off for an entire month to pay that fine. But then I wouldn't have anything for my..." He stopped. He rubbed his hand over his nose. "I'm royally fucked. Ethan, I don't know what to tell you." "You don't have to tell me anything." He stood up and pushed his hands into his pockets. "Thanks for today, officer. You were very kind." Then he walked away. "Hey," I called after him. "I'll drop you off. Come on." He turned to me and looked confused for a moment. "You don't have to." "I know, but it's late and cold. Come on." I started walking to my car and thanked the high heavens when I heard him following me. "You know," I began finally after some moments of silent driving, "it's not absolutely a given thing that you would have to pay him a fine." "Huh?" Ethan said. What happened?" I corrected myself. "It was a complex thing. He'll have to prove the mental distress was the direct consequence of your action. Then the court will ask you why you did what you did. Obviously, that means that they would like you to open up. After that, it will be decided. But, Ethan prodded, but you did not endanger his life. Not really. So I will just say you're safe, Ethan. I turned to him and gave him a look. It's alright. Just be careful from now on. I did not do it for fun, Ethan protested. I nodded to soothe his anxiety. I know that. Familiar streets? I asked. I'm pointing around us. He nodded. You will be home soon. I did not really see Ethan after that, at least not in the ways I expected to see him. When I walked into my favorite cafe 2 days after that weird case, I saw Ethan at the counter, handling the orders. I raised my eyebrow in surprise. This was the first time I'd seen him here. I wondered if he had recently joined. Recently meant the last 2 days. Hey, Ethan, I greeted. Recognize me? He looked up and then down. How could I not recognize the officer who messed up my life more than it already was? Excuse me? I asked, a little confused now. I was being blamed for doing my duty. But hey, when did you join? For an officer, you really are not the sharpest tool in the shed. He slid the menu towards me, despite the obvious offense on my face. Why was it that I was being insulted? Yet I did not care. I've been working here for nearly 7 months now. I was in the back first, of course. The last one left, so I took his position. What would you like to order, sir? He asked again, and started tapping impatiently. I looked behind me and found 3 people waiting behind me. I stopped. Black coffee. Just that? Ethan confirmed. I nodded, and so he printed the bill. It would be ready soon, sir. You may take a seat. He looked over my shoulder and smiled at the next customer. And as I sat at my usual desk, sipping on my bottled water, I couldn't help but observe him more. Did I do that again the next day? And the day after that? And the day after that? Yes, I did. For some unfathomable reason, seeing his face had become the highlight of my day. Sometimes it even brought me relief that he was well and alive and kicking. The thing that I worried was in danger. I would have liked to strike up a conversation with Ethan any moment, given the chance, but Ethan did not look like he would appreciate that, so I bided my time, in some ways hoping that someday an occasion would present itself and would spark some form of communication between us. It started in a weird way. It was on the 5th day after that police station visit. Strangely, there were fewer people in the cafe today. I still associated that with heavy snowfall. I was drinking the last bit of my black coffee and was about to order another glass when Ethan slipped on the seat in front of me. He had his own cup with him, but I did not think it was black coffee. Hi, officer, he said. Hello, Ethan, I replied. How are you doing? Ethan shrugged as he always did. Do you really come here every day? I nodded. Even on my off days, I replied. I've been visiting it for some years now, and I cannot really imagine my mornings without this place. He gave a subtle scoff. You sound like an old man. Okay, I said with a little smile. And you look like one too, he added, and pointed at the thin mustache on my face. Makes you look older. You should cut it. I've never cut it, I answered, and touched it with my fingers. Maybe you should, Ethan said, and leaned against a chair more comfortably. The only reason I'm sitting here is because there aren't many people around. Maybe you should use that to your advantage. Sorry? I asked. He scoffed again, but this time it sounded mocking. For an officer, you really are not the sharpest tool in the shed. He stood up and grabbed his glass. Bye, officer. It's Mike, I said. He turned to give me a look. Okay, Mike. Bye. I thought it was a goodbye for the day as it was clear I was about to leave, but it turned out that Ethan had left the cafe the same day. When I returned on the 6th day, I found a new girl sitting at the desk. Hey, I began. Who was this guy? Where'd he go? The girl looked bored out of her bits, so I was lucky I even got an answer out. He has left, she answered. Or something, I don't know. You can ask others, but they'll probably tell you the same thing. Okay, I said. Thanks. She nodded. Your order will soon be ready, sir. For some reason, looking at her made me upset. It just did not sit well with me. Still, I sat down on my usual chair and waited for my warm cup of black coffee. I assumed the reason he left was intentional and planned, but it wasn't so, and I found out about it after I returned from the family vacation. My brothers and their little families were already present in the living room when I walked into my parents' home in the evening. Christmas was 2 days later, and I was hoping to spend as little time as possible with them. I told them I would leave on the 26th. They showed a little disappointment, but did not protest much. I had expected that much, so I wasted time watching the news and movies with my dad and brothers. At some point, the conversation steered into two different directions: my work and my love life. Handling the work conversation was easy. I was the only person in the family within the public sector, and they liked to hear about the strangest encounters I had over the months. "Are you serious?" one of my brothers asked. "How old was he anyway?" 19, I answered. "That's young," my brother said. "Very young," I agreed. "I would say do a background check on him or something if you're suspicious that it's a case of abuse. Shouldn't that be your responsibility?" "I cannot just go and check," I argued. "I could do that easily, but I wasn't sure Ethan would appreciate that." "It wouldn't hurt to check," my brother argued back. That was the end of it. Then obviously began my family's quest to know if I had found myself a nice lady or not. They knew it was bi and they were okay with it. Even then, they rather hoped for a woman to come instead of a man. I told them that I had found no one. They sighed in disappointment again. Strangely, to provoke them, I let out one name. It was a sudden decision, so utterly and miserably planned, that I spent my night wondering why the hell I said that name instead of any other. "There's a boy, though," I said, and I cleared my throat. "Ethan's his name." "Oh," my dad said. "He is, cute," I added. "Well, bring him to us someday," my dad said warmly. See, they would rather I bring him another daughter-in-law, but even then, they weren't against the idea of a son-in-law. It was this kind of moment that confused the heck out of me. I nodded and peeled the label off the beer bottle in my hand. "I will." On my drive to the station on the 28th, I decided to take a little detour and found myself driving along those vaguely familiar streets that I had seen the night I dropped Ethan off. It snowed heavily last night, so I was really taking an unnecessary risk. But something was bugging me, and I couldn't help myself when I rang the bell and patiently waited for some 5 minutes before a sleepy Ethan opened the door. There were fresh bruises on his neck. He hid them the moment he noticed it was me. My brother's words replayed in my head. Should I butt in? "Hi," I said. "I came to check up on you." "I'm doing well, officer. Thank you. You may leave now." He then tried to close the door in my face, but I stretched out an arm and stopped it. "What do you need?" he asked, slightly irritated now. "I want to check on you, that's all." "And you have," he said in a whispered hiss. He looked behind himself and then at me. "You can leave. Someone will come and they will get the wrong idea. Right now, what I understand is that if you do not explain to me what I stopped and pointed at his neck, then I would get the wrong idea." He pressed a hand over his neck. "I knew you were annoying the moment I saw your face," he said and grabbed his jacket, walked outside and then closed the door after him. "Come," he said and swiftly walked away from his home. It was freezing cold and this was not my intention. I was not supposed to handle this in such a manner. I sighed and followed him. We walked into a little cafe and he greeted the manager with a small nod. He settled in the furthest corner. I settled in front of him. He looked at me strangely. "You sound like you're obsessed with me." "I'm not," I replied, "merely curious." "And why am I not your subject?" he said, and then sighed. "Whatever, go on, ask." "What's that?" I asked the obvious. "I fell down the stairs," Ethan replied. "And that's lie number one." He smiled and then looked down. "Is it going to become a case?" "Only if you want," I comforted him. It was not a formal investigation anyway. I wanted to know what was going on with him so that I could be there when he needed me. Or the law, whatever he needed. He took a deep breath. "My family is a little mean to me," he began. "I'm the extra child. They didn't want me. They never wanted me. My mom had just gotten pregnant with me, but her family did not want her to go through an abortion. I was born and added another set of responsibilities on their shoulders that they could have lived without. Then, as I grew up, I started showing an interest in..." He stopped and cleared his throat. "Men. That made it worse, and they'd planned that they would use me to marry a rich girl or something, leech off her wealth and all that. But that looked impossible now, so they got a little mean," he finished. I looked at the angry red marks peeking through his jacket and wondered if that was a result of someone's parents just being a little mean. But I did not want to cross my boundary any more than I already had, so I kept my mouth shut. "Have you told anyone?" "That they beat me?" he asked and curled his fingers on the edge of the table. "I was not planning to," he answered. "You're the first person I've told this to." Now it would be another thing if someone else noticed something that they shouldn't have. You can ask for my help, I said. I know, he answered. You do look like you want to be my friend. Then he sat a little straighter, a little more confident now. But I'm planning to stay here for a little longer. And why? I asked. He grinned. Dad's dying, he said. And I'm going to watch him slowly succumb to his illness. And then when that pathetic little man dies, I will leave. That was the weirdest thing I had heard in a while. Even then, and despite that little strange conversation we had, I held his hand in mine before he could leave. When he looked down at our joined hands, I dropped his hand and apologized. Let's go out this weekend, I suggested. Where? He asked. I shrugged, off a habit that I had started picking up from him. Wherever. He draped his jacket better around himself and then nodded. All right, he answered. This weekend? At 7? I nodded. This weekend at 7. I will pick you up. On Sunday, when he climbed in my car, the first thing I subtly tried to search for was any fresh bruises or wounds. There weren't any, so I sighed and welcomed him with a smile. He gave me a strange look. He knew what I was doing. He can't really get up now without hurting himself, Ethan began. Your dad? I asked. Our conversation was steadily turning morbid. It was this side of Ethan that I didn't understand what I was supposed to do with. He nodded eagerly. Today, Mom asked me to feed him his soup. If I had been a little evil, I could have literally killed him, and no one would have suspected me. Ethan, I warned, if this was really this serious, I would have been forced to do something that I didn't want. Although it made sense why Ethan was reacting in the way he was, I didn't want him to end up doing something that he would regret later, or worse. Don't worry, officer, he said. Don't want to hurt anyone. Oh, Ethan, I said. You can trust me on that, I promise, he said with a smile. He looked out the window. So where are we going? I shrugged. Anywhere you want me to stop, I will. Oh, he said. That's exciting. And that was how we ended up eating ice cream in December. I think I'm going to be sick. Oh my God, I said. Ethan did not look like he was much bothered with anything. He ate his ice cream in peace and with a smile. He didn't care, he said. It's better if I get sick. They leave me alone when I'm sick. Ethan, I said when I was done with mine, would you like to stay with me? I'm not going to kill him, he said with an eye roll. I'm not talking about that, I replied and cleared my throat. I just don't understand why you're even staying there. I've already told you, and I'm not going to repeat it. He threw his ice cream in the dustbin with a loud clang. If you're going to be so annoying, then you can drop me at my place. No, I'm sorry. I held his wrist before he could leave. Let's go and eat. He looked at me strangely. We don't talk about this? We don't, I promised. All right then. I sighed and followed after him. The next day, I was the first to arrive at the station. Last night went well, and it was precisely for that very reason that I was in a good mood. When Matt arrived, he found me whistling to some very corny romantic song. He stopped before my desk and dramatically slapped his hand on the table. Mike, he said, what the heck have you done with your face? I looked up consciously. Is it not good? I asked. No, he stopped. I've never seen you clean shaven, that's all. I grinned and shrugged. I thought I should try a new look, and I couldn't help myself. I rubbed a hand over my smooth face. Thank God I used moisturizer. Without all the hair and mustache, it felt softer than it usually did. Good? Yeah, I suppose. Makes you look your age. Matt cleared his throat and sat to one of the extra chairs. What case are you working on? He asked. Nothing too serious, I answered. Just have to finish some reports, that's all. He nodded. I have lots of work to do, so I'll let you leave. Hey, listen. He checked his surroundings before starting. The other guys are going to drink this weekend at the pub. Come with us? I don't really drink, I said and wrinkled my nose. Yeah, but once or twice a month is okay, right? He stepped back. I'll message you the place on Friday. Be there, alright? I nodded, and we went back to our work. I called Ethan instead of ringing the bell on Wednesday of the same week. He had suggested keeping away from his home as much as possible. He didn't want to have another argument about God and gays with his family, he had said, and so I followed his advice. He picked up my call and then left his home some 10 minutes later. This time, too, we didn't really know where we were going. It was late evening and we didn't really have much time to spend time outside anyway. I still had work to do tomorrow and Ethan still had to return to his home. Most importantly, I really wanted to see his reaction. Oh, he said when he saw me. Then he broke out into the biggest grin I had ever seen on his face. You cut your mustache. Yeah, after that comment of yours, I really felt awkward about it. He wriggled his eyebrows. But hey, the bullying did you some good. You look... His eyes scanned my face, and I saw the slowly rising blush on his cheeks. I was glad I had that effect on him. Handsome? You deserve a treat for your handsome face. Let's go. I laughed and followed him to the same nearby cafe from his home. He ordered a hot chocolate for both of us and brushed off my compliments when I said it would be too heavy. Shut up, you gym freak. Here. He stopped and gave me one cup. Let's walk around the place. You know, I began after a while. My first boyfriend was my best friend. Oh, Jesus, he muttered. I nodded. We thought it would work out the way it did in movies, but nothing like that happened. It got so messy after a while that we had to separate to save our friendship. We managed to save it, but it isn't the same anymore. Moral of the story, don't date your best friends, he said. But it works for some people, I protested. You did not set a good example, he replied. But hey, it's nothing as stupid as mine. I think part of the reason my family hated finding out I was gay was because they found me kissing my homeroom teacher. He was in his late 30s and I was 15 or 16. What the heck? I couldn't help but let out. He shrugged. It was surely a mistake, but I didn't know any better then. I was more concerned about something else, however. What happened to the teacher? He's behind the bars, Ethan replied. I think a 6-year sentence? I sighed. Thank God. I would have beaten him to a pulp if he were out. Ethan suddenly stopped. How old are you? He asked. I stopped too. Now I was curious what he intended to do with that information. I cleared my throat and answered that I was 24. He nodded with a grin. Then you'll be in no trouble, officer. I furrowed my eyebrows. Trouble for what? Oh. Lo and behold, Ethan had just kissed me. I guess, besides all the other moments we had spent together, that kiss was a watershed moment for me or something, because after that kiss, I couldn't really move on from anything else. But of course, there was something else that was bothering me, and that was precisely why I was walking up and down the station. Worried lines visible on my face. When Ethan kissed me last night, it took me by surprise. It wasn't because I hadn't been thinking about kissing him all the time, but because of how random it was. At one moment, we were talking about our past, and all of a sudden he kissed me. Was it his way of manipulating my emotions? I couldn't tell. But at that time, I was taken by surprise. And soon after that, with passion. So when he kissed me, I pulled him close to me by his waist, and I kissed him in return. Right when we were locked in a passionate kiss, we heard the call of his name. It was coming from a distance, but it was obvious that the caller was pissed and upset. Ethan slowly pulled him away from me and turned with a sigh. It was his mother, he told me. She looked at my uniform and then at the closeness between us, then barked again for Ethan to return home. Ethan held my hand and gave me a kiss again before following his mother. But something just felt wrong then. I called him an hour later, jiggly and useless after that kiss, but he did not pick up. He then messaged me around 2 in the morning and told me that he would talk to me sometime else. And now here I was. It was noon, and I hadn't heard a single thing from Ethan. After an hour of overthinking, I nearly hauled myself from the station and into the direction of Ethan's home to see if he was alright. But I controlled any such urge. I stopped walking up and down when Matt harshly slapped the register on his desk with a swear. Can you stop doing that, Mike? He growled. I'm not bothering you, am I? You're being an annoying little prick, that's all, he replied with a smile. I'm sorry, I'm just a little caught up. Then go and solve it. When I did not move, he sighed. You're gonna have a very strange day today, Mike, he said and returned to his work. In the evening of the same day, Ethan walked into the station and sat down in front of me. I was working on a file but stopped immediately when I saw his look. He looked exhausted and sad, distraught even. But more than any of that, he looked lost. Are you busy? He asked and pulled his jacket close to himself. Yeah, a little. Are you alright? I will wait, he answered instead. But we can leave together. I have something to tell you. He rubbed his hands anxiously. But please be done soon. We can talk now. Finish your work, officer. I can wait. He then got up and left. When I returned my attention to the station, I found Matt looking at me through his glasses. Strange day today, man, he repeated. You don't have to come to the bar now. Tend to your boyfriend. And it was a strange day. Ethan was sitting exactly where I had seen him in the first night. He did not stand up when he saw me. He still looked sad. He told me his dad had finally died. It happened in his sleep. and he passed on quietly and peacefully. Although Ethan looked a little sad at his passing, he was upset that he died so peacefully. "He used to beat me so much for no reason," he said. "He cannot anymore." I pressed a hand to the back of his neck. "Even then, I'm not at peace." "That's besides the point. Thing is, my mom kicked me out a few hours after he died, and she asked her mother to keep me with her until I found a better job, so I was here to tell you that this might be the last time we see each other." I was a lot to take in. "Wait," I said. "Hold on, you're leaving?" He shrugged. "What else do you want me to do?" I closed my eyes. "We kissed last night, Ethan. Does that not mean anything?" He did not speak, so I opened my eyes and held his wrist. "I'm not saying we immediately need to do something, but stay. Your dad has died, right? What about the rest of your family? Are you going to let them get away with what they have done?" He scoffed. "You didn't think it'd be so easy for them, did you? I've already filed a case against my family. You're going to get it bad from now on." "How? When?" I asked, a little baffled now. He grinned. "When you were busy dealing with your work, I wanted to come to you, but I also wanted to save you from all the gory details, so I registered with another officer." "And you will stay with your grandmother during it all?" He nodded. "Stay with me then?" I asked. "I'm not forcing you, of course. It's your choice, but if you really need a safe space to stay, I'm also available." "But," he said, and struggled a little, "I don't want to be a bother." "You're not," I softly said. "Besides, we can talk as much as you want." "About?" "About anything. Your hobbies, your family, your past, anything." "Okay," he said finally with a soft smile. "We can talk." "Right. You're coming with me then?" He nodded. "I will inform my grandparents then." "What will you say?" I asked and rubbed my head. "I'm staying with my boyfriend. What else?" There was a twinkle in his eyes. Matt was wrong this time. It wasn't exactly a strange day. I was in a deep sleep when I woke up to the sound of a loud crash. Groggily, I turned on my bed and looked at the door. It was still early morning, so I hoped I wouldn't have to use my gun. And it was no such thing. It was Ethan. It was the third day of his stay at my place. The police investigation was still going on, and Ethan's case looked strong. I could tell by the bruises and the marks all over his body that he was going to win the case. When one of the officers asked him why he stayed with the family despite the fact that he could have left, he answered that he just wanted to see his father suffer. Although it was a creepy answer, everyone ate it up. "That was what the years of abuse did to you," they whispered behind his back. And now, here was Ethan, dressed in my clothes and sloppily cleaning the glass off the floor. I saw bits of omelet on the floor and spilled coffee. I knew what happened. Still, I asked, "What happened?" He jumped a little. "I was making you breakfast." "It's all right." I stretched out a hand for him to take. "Come on, leave it. I'll clean it later, Ethan." "Leave it," I repeated. He sighed and carefully navigated his way through the broken shards. He took my hand and stood in front of my bed. "Don't worry, I'm dressed," I said. "You can grab another comforter and take another nap. It's too early. I will cook us something." "I'm sorry." "It's all right," I said. "Come here." And he did. "We'll clean it later. Go to sleep." "Are you sure?" he asked softly. I nodded and looked over the mess. "Yes." Maybe someday he will even tell me why he had stopped in front of that van. Conclusion. Just like how troubling it is for abuse survivors, it was difficult for Ethan too. For months on end, as the investigation went on, we merely kissed and did nothing. When he finally won the case and his mother was sent to jail for 5 years, we first slept together. Ethan has been living with me now, and if everything goes well, he will continue to live with me for some time to come. As excited as I am about this change in life, I'm hoping one day I will be able to figure out everything about Ethan. The end. How careful do you have to be around abuse survivors? Is there a parameter? Let us know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.